So we talked about the end of the war and how it was a really monumental moment for Canadians because we can continue to improve our presence in all of the Allied power battles that move forward. The war in the Pacific, that now that Germany has unconditionally surrendered, we've moved into Germany. Russia's put their flag on top of their parliament building. So we've made a lot of movement in terms of invasion and the end of the war. But the war in the Pacific was also very important as well. If you do remember, we had the Battle of Pearl Harbor where the Americans were bombed by the Japanese and they were taken off guard, which led to the entry of the United States into the war. The retaliation of that was when Harry Truman decided that he wanted to drop an atomic bomb on Japan. So there are many reasons for and against, and many people who supported the decision and didn't support the decision. So we can see here in this chart where we say that, well, you know what, it was just retaliation. They want to bomb us, we're going to bomb them back. The other one is that the American people actually ended up impacting more civilians than they did military soldiers, whereas in Japan, the Japanese justification for their attack was basically that they were looking to just bomb the military instead. So Truman decided to use the bomb on Japan because he believed it was the only way to get the Japanese to surrender. He ended up bombing Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So you can see that this is the plane that actually ends up dropping the bomb. The movie Pearl Harbor is a really interesting rendition of how this follows through. So the United States decides to use the atomic bombs. These are only attacks with nuclear weapons, and the first time that nuclear weapon warfare has happened. You can see here that this is a map of Japan, and for you to be able to see where those bombs took place. So on August 6, 1945, the first Enola Gay by its crew took off and headed to Hiroshima, which is the plane. Little Boy at 8:15 a.m. was dropped on Hiroshima, and on August 11th, Fat Man was dropped on Nagasaki. By noon of August 15th, 1945, the Emperor Hirohito of Japan at the time surrenders and officially ends all combat for World War II. What were the impacts of the bombs? Well, as many as 140,000 people in Hiroshima and 80,000 in Nagasaki were dead. 15 to 20% died from injuries or combined effects of flash burns, trauma, and radiation burns. And more have died from leukemia or cancer, and they continue to suffer health-wise through many of the atrocities, alongside the Canadian-Japanese internment camps as well. So, why did the Allies end up winning? Well, we'll consider World War I and the entry of the Americans and World War II and the entry of the Americans. They have this really uncanny ability to come in just when they're needed as the knights in shining armor. We also had complete material superiority, weapons, more soldiers, better strategies. And again, we really learned a lot of lessons from World War I as well. How many Canadian lives were lost? So they say 60 million people, which is over 2.5% of the world's population, died in World War II. In comparison to World War I, our casualties were more so based on soldiers and their impact of the war, and Canada lost over 45,000 lives and spent $10 billion on World War II. And interestingly enough, Germany actually spent almost nothing on the war. They used all of the assets that they had collected and confiscated from the Jews, and they used that to help purchase their warfare, which is pretty interesting. And that's it for the war in the Pacific.